The base is dropped on a Friday edition of Soccer Down here. It's March 13th. Don't really know what we're going to get into today. There is one big thing in the soccer world outside of cancellations that we'll be talking about a good bit this morning. And if you missed it last night, Carlos Cordero stepped down as president of the United States Soccer Federation. There's a ton of things to get into with that, and we will. We'll talk about that this morning. But the bigger story, and I mean, you guys have seen it all by now. No MLS for at least 30 days. No USL Championship. No USL League One. Their season has been delayed to start. NWSL, same. No soccer anywhere in the United States in an organized professional or semi-professional fashion. Right now, I believe the major leagues that are continuing in the world, the Bundesliga is slated as we're speaking to play behind closed doors this weekend, but that is very up in the air as one of their managers has come down ill and I believe has been tested for coronavirus. Have not seen an update on this just yet. If that comes back positive, I don't see any way they play this weekend. I think it's ludicrous that they're even exploring it. Liga MX is set to continue with fans in the stands, and John is in Mexico City and can speak to this a little bit. From my experience in Mexico, which was landing Monday around 5 o'clock or so Mexico City time, and leaving a few hours after the game completed Wednesday night, things changed pretty quickly in terms of just, I think, observable things. Didn't really notice anybody, maybe except for one person at the airport as an employee at the airport when we arrived wearing a mask. When we left, everybody was. The outbreak has not affected Mexico in any way like it has most other countries that we've been talking about in terms of a soccer conversation. It just hasn't yet. Doesn't mean that it won't, and you would think with all of the back and forth between the United States and Mexico that it will at some point, but it hasn't yet, and they're planning to continue this weekend. Champions League and Europa League, everything is shut down. Libertadores in South America has shut down after this week's matches. There's not much else left, and John, I don't know what else is being said in Mexico about this. I know it's been a hot topic, but in Mexico, it's a little bit different conversation.
And this is just anecdotal evidence on my part. Walking around Mexico City yesterday, very few people wearing masks. My flight to return to Atlanta is slated for 2:30 Eastern time. So I'll have the airport anecdotes in a little while. But walking around Mexico City yesterday, very few people wearing masks. Conversations normal, interactions are normal, and for me going forward, obviously I'll be paying attention to see how that has changed, will change over the next little while. But yeah, as of yesterday and continuing since I'm here longer than you and the team, things are pretty much, there are conversations, but for the most part, it is still pretty much business as usual. I'm looking out my hotel room window, and the sun is rising. You have traffic. You have folks heading to work. You have folks doing their normal things as it is 7:15 here or 7:10 here in the morning. So right now, it's as normal as you would anticipate with what we know going on in the world, saying elsewise.
Yeah, and it's not normal on this side of the Rio Grande. It was, I mean, kind of just surreal from probably about middle of the day on Wednesday through now, and it will be surreal for quite a while. I mean, I can give you my experience with it. As the day was going on Wednesday, it was looking more and more likely that that Wednesday night's match could be the last Atlanta United match we see for a while. And there's no idea how long that's going to be. There's no way to know. This is all, uncharted territory. When any kind of extended absence, you're probably going to need some form of a preseason to get back into game shape, and don't even know when that could start, let alone when matches could start. The good thing from an MLS perspective is you're only 2 games into the season, so you've got a pretty good amount of flexibility in terms of solving this issue. European leagues, it's a whole different conversation, and we'll get into some of the specifics with that because there are logistical issues with all of this that will have to be dealt with along the way. But as the day was going on Wednesday, it was looking more and more likely that the NBA would announce that they'd be playing, either behind closed doors or suspending the season. This was before the Rudy Gobert incident. Uh, when that started to break, it became very obvious that things would be very different. It happened really fast that the NBA made their announcement. I mean, games were going on. The Atlanta Hawks were playing on 92-90 game, and we were coming in after that game. And it was surreal to hear the end of that game as we're sitting at the Estadio Azteca waiting for an Atlanta United Club America match that was eagerly anticipated and a lot on the line, a big match, and it was hard to really focus on it because we're hearing Steve Holman in our headsets, talk about how the NBA is shutting down after the game, and once that started, that's when all the dominoes started to fall. You had some different leagues that wanted to hold out longer, different competitions that wanted to hold out longer. I mean, it's all changed over the last day, and as the game was going on, obviously the way the match went, and we can talk about the match if y'all want to. This is basically a show that y'all can tell us what you want to talk about, and we will. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. Let us know what's on your mind today. But, as the game was going on, and it wasn't a good 45 minutes, it was, a bad way to start it. The second half was a great effort. Not good enough quality, ultimately. Hit the bar maybe a couple times. Definitely one that I don't know how that doesn't get into the back of the net. Just one of those nights. And as it's drifting off to its conclusion that it's going to be a loss for Atlanta, it's probably going to make the second leg not impossible, but very, very unlikely that you're going to be able to turn that around. And at that point, we don't even know when the second leg's going to be because it's starting to look like, all right, because this is getting close to 12:30 Eastern time, and announcements just kept coming after the NBA made theirs, and it just kept going. Now, we did not know at the time that what was going to happen with MLS or USL Championship or anything. We did not know that when we signed off. We didn't know that when we landed. We went straight to the airport from the stadium, and we didn't know what was going to happen. Riding back home in a Lyft, talking to the driver about everything. None of us really knew what was going to happen, and I was exhausted. I'd been up for close to 24 hours at that point. I went to sleep. Woke up at about 1 o'clock, and you'd had the MLS announcement, you'd had USL Championship, you'd had all the other leagues at that point. The NCAA tournament came a little while later. I mean, it just kept going, and now we're left with really not much going on in the sports world. Nothing going on in the United States that I know of on any kind of a major scale. I
No,
believe there is a UFC event in Brazil this weekend, which is madness. Although Brazil is another country that I've not really heard of much of an issue with this as of yet. But some of the statements that have come out of the UFC side of things are just borderline insane at this point. Uh, the Liga MX is really about it. I think Australia, the A League, might be continuing at the moment, and that's about it. That's where we're at. The Premier League finally came to its senses this morning and made its announcement along with the EFL and the Women's Super League that all of them would shut down through the beginning or the early April, through the first weekend in April, and would reassess. And I guess that's one thing that I wanted to kind of start with is it's really difficult to know when things are going to get back to some semblance of normal. The current seasons, and honestly, I think the next seasons are all going to be affected by this whenever that time comes that action can resume. In the United States, they're probably going to be affected less than most just because it's so early in the season. I mean, USL League One hasn't started yet. NWSL hasn't started yet. USL Championship has 1 week in the books. MLS has 2 weeks in the books. So if the season is extended and you get an MLS Cup in early December, like we've seen not that long ago, okay, there might be ways to figure this out. Maybe the season gets shortened. Maybe you have more midweek games. Whatever. There's ways to have a normal season and then have a normal start to the 21 season, depending on when things happen. And that's the biggest thing is we don't know. Leagues in Europe, and this is probably a big reason why you've had a lot of pushback and maybe a lot of dumb decisions made in terms of dragging this out. Scotland, just about an hour ago, announced that they weren't playing this weekend. They were going to have the Old Firm match between Rangers and Celtic with probably 50,000 fans in attendance on Sunday, which, again, would have been madness. One of the big reasons is you have legal issues when it comes to all kinds of aspects. I mean, let's start with contracts. Many contracts run through June 30th. So it's not like MLS where you're early in the season. You have contracts ending June 30th. So could you get the season completed by June 30th? There's no way to know that right now. Um, if you can't, what does that mean? And that's why you've had the conversation in England where it's come up about what's the wording they've been saying it's going to be. They're talking about potentially making the season void, and I don't know what that
Yes.
means. I don't know if that means it didn't exist. I don't know if that means they just declare it's over and declare champions, because that's when you get to the next step of this. In leagues that have promotion relegation, what are you going to do? I've even seen some speculation that Germany in the Bundesliga would not relegate anyone and would promote 4 teams from the second division and go with a 22-team league in the next season. Um, Everything's on the table right now. There's just no way to know without knowing timelines. There's no way to know, but these are the things that make this complicated. Just a small bit of what makes it complicated because it's not an easy decision. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of legality involved. There's a lot of logistics involved. It's incredibly complicated across the board.
Yeah, the wording from Nathan Salt at Mail Online is that null and void would be
But what does
one of
that
the
mean? That's the thing, is I don't know what that means.
yeah, and I'm trying to find the background of null and void to see what that specifically refers to.
Because here's my
Uh,
thing on that. You can't say the season didn't exist. You can't say there's not a champion for the year. You can't do that. Now, do you say it's null and void in the sense of you're not going to relegate anybody because the season didn't get completed? Okay, what are you going to say to the teams that would have been promoted? This is where you get into all kinds of complicated things. I don't think you can actually do that because if you are who's first in the championship right now, who would be automatically promoted
it's
if it ended?
it's been back and forth between West Brom and Leeds.
So it's not even true. I mean, there would still be a lot of work to do for that to be determined.
Yeah,
But if you come out and say it's null and void, nothing happened, we're starting the next season with the same teams in the same spots, how do you think that's going to go?
you'll have folks who won't be fans of that. Yeah, right now it's Leeds by a point over West Brom.
You'll have lawyers who might be a fan of that because you're going to
Yeah,
get into that situation because you're talking about, again, a lot of money. And that echoes what Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said. And Ricky Ricardo, thanks for sending it. I'd seen this earlier. Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, CEO of Bayern Munich, talking about the Bundesliga playing this weekend behind closed doors at this point. At the end of the day, it's about finances and the outstanding big TV payments to the clubs. I think it's right that under the current conditions, the games this weekend take place. It's And a lot of people will point and laugh at that and say that it's stupid. You do have a financial component to this. There's no way around it. You do. You have sponsorship agreements. You have TV payments. You have money coming in that won't come in now, and we've talked about it probably for months now about some leagues. The TV money is absolutely critical, and in some leagues like MLS and USL Championship, probably even more so. Gate revenue is absolutely critical. So for a Bundesliga, for example, to say that from this perspective, and they're leaving out some very key things in making this decision, we'll talk about in a second. From this perspective, yeah, the TV money is the number one thing. They can deal without people in the stands buying concessions and paying for tickets and et cetera, because the TV money is the big thing. What they're not taking into account is what changed with the NBA, with Rudy Gobert coming out, being announced that he tested positive for coronavirus, and a trainer running out onto the court right before they're about to tip off. I mean, they're playing the music that will lead them into the tip off, and it's surreal to see it. I did not see it Wednesday night. I saw it yesterday afternoon, and it's absolutely surreal to see because everybody's ready to go. It's about to start. Referees are huddled, and then trainer comes running out. They talk. They send the teams to the locker rooms, and that's what's different about this. And this is why Rumenega's statement is crazy right now. It's not even for these teams at this point. Okay, you take the fans out of it, and you take the large gathering out of it. That's great. That's a step, sure. But now you're talking about players and multiple players who have been infected. And Rudy Gobert was the first one to test positive. One of his teammates, Donovan Mitchell, tested positive. You have managers in Europe. Mikel Arteta has tested positive. You have players. Rugani with Juventus has tested positive. I mean, there's quite a few. President of Olympiacos. I mean, it just continues and continues and continues. So, sure, you're taking the fans out of it, and that's okay, whatever. You're still putting players at risk. You're putting referees at risk. You're putting anybody who's in that building at risk. And this was the thing with basketball when the NBA or the NCAA tournament was talking about playing behind closed doors. Hey, you're taking the fans out of it, but what about the actual ball? How do you play basketball? You grab it with your hands. What are
Mm-hmm.
you being told not to do? I mean, this is not rocket science. So now you're at a point where, okay, sure, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, you're going to take the fans out of the building and you're going to get your TV payment, but you're putting everybody that is on the field at risk, and all the people around that, trainers, assistant coaches, everybody. And it's just completely and utterly unnecessary at this point, let alone, and this is the other part of it, what did we see with PSG, for example, this week, playing behind closed doors in the Champions League? What did we see outside the stadium? Fans gathering, which is what you're trying to avoid. So there's no, I know the TV payments are a big deal. I understand this, and the Bundesliga clubs are probably more financially stable than a lot around the world, but there are clubs that are going to suffer dramatically from these losses in revenue, and it's understandable. Like, it's going to happen, but there's no way you can justify playing games this weekend if you're the Bundesliga. You just can't.
As of right now, courtesy of Yahoo Sports in the UK, this weekend's Bundesliga and two Bundesliga fixtures, including Bayern Munich's trip to Union Berlin, largely going ahead as planned behind closed doors. However, Hamburg's clash with Dynamo Dresden has been canceled, and I know that there's also discussion that the Bayer Leverkusen away fixture is going to be postponed as well because the mayor of the town that Leverkusen is going into doesn't want anyone from the outside of the town coming in for any kind of possible risk. So that's the latest update out of Bundesliga right now.
I forgot, and Ricky Ricardo pointed it out. NASCAR is one of the other events going on.
This weekend next, without fans, yes, and they have amended media access and availabilities as well.
Um, I don't know. a little bit different conversation, at least in the way the actual competition unfolds. I mean, somebody's in a car, they're isolated. It's all the stuff outside of that that's the problem, but whatever,
But you had the
NASCAR.
Formula One race in Australia, and this is also because of the one of the crew members for one of the teams had tested positive, and Lewis Hamilton had said at one point, "Why are we still here?" And it took Formula One a while to come around to it, but they finally did cancel the Australian Grand Prix, and I believe they've postponed the next two in Bahrain and Vietnam, which gets you to mid-April.
Yeah, and that's where you start to get into travel and the complications with that, and it's I don't know. We'll see what happens with all of it. Uh, I mean, what else in the soccer world on this needs to be covered? What are people saying on Twitter right now?
Right now, they're drifting over to what's going on with U.S. soccer right now more than anything.
Well,
And
let's jump into
uh,
that because that's there's plenty to talk about there. Uh, we've mentioned it a few times. I think when the first batch of stuff came out, depositions and statements that were given from U.S. Soccer, I thought it was pretty obvious what the legal strategy was, and I mean I remember talking about this. Everything bleeds together at this point, but I want to say weeks ago when that first batch of things came out, and you started to get not quite as much detail as we got in this last batch, but good bit of understanding that U.S. Soccer was not going to fight this in any other way, this legal case with equal pay and the U.S. Women's National Team, in any other way other than a ridiculous PR stunt. And as we said again this week, from a lawyer perspective, not actually thinking about people and just thinking about can they win the case. Uh, I don't know. Maybe it was a strategy that they felt like they could win the case with. Maybe there was some precedent. I have no idea. But from a PR standpoint and just treating people who are your constituents, and if you're the U.S. Soccer Federation, you are the governing body for the sport in the country, and that's the whole sport, not just the men's national team, not just boys playing, but girls. And when you make the statement saying that the U.S. women's national team is not the same as the men because they're not as skilled, I mean, they don't have as many responsibilities. Like, come on, that's insanity. And we talked about it Wednesday. It's insanity, and it all kept blowing up. And the women's national team came out for their She Believes match with their warm-up jerseys turned inside out to not have the Federation logo on it. The stars were still on it because they were on the front and they are stitched through the back. So you had that, but you didn't have the crest, and that was a powerful statement. I thought as everybody kind of caught on to this, it made sense that Carlos Cordero would not still be in his position. His statement was kind of maddening, to be perfectly honest, last night, because it really felt like the worst news dump you could imagine to do what he did when he did, and maybe he thought that it would not be talked about. Well, he drastically miscalculated that one because I think they broke into SportsCenter with it. It's been talked about everywhere. Uh, it's unbelievable that the president of U.S. Soccer, who is overseeing everything that the organization does, he's not the CEO. There's not a CEO right now, which is even better. Um, he's not the CEO, but especially in this case, he's overseeing everything, and he says he didn't know what the lawyers were doing. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's mind blowing if that's actually true, and I don't think it is. I think it's a cop out because the lawyers were not acting on their own.
yeah, you're not renegade lawyers.
No, um, this would be agreed upon. And now people I think have lumped other things into it, and this is where I do think there is potential, for other people not understanding what's going on. Like board members, different board members have come out and said, like I think Don Garber was one
Yep.
that they thought this was incorrect, they thought it was wrong, and they were not apprised of the situation. That's different. because the whole board is not meeting with the legal staff. That's not how these things work. The president of the organization that the lawyers are working for would be talking to the lawyers. The CEO definitely would be, and depending on how things roles are defined, other front office staff would be. A board would not be, because a board doesn't deal with day to day. A board doesn't deal with that specific of things. I would hope they would be being apprised of it, but if they are, if they aren't, I don't know. But the president, no, he has nothing to stand on. It's unbelievable that he would try to use that excuse. Somebody signed off on it, and if it wasn't him, who was it? Because it was short-sighted, stupid, insulting, damaging, and has set back an organization that has had enough problems over the last few years and has made it even more difficult for them to be trusted when it comes to growing the game, period. And there's a lot of people who are going to jump on whatever their agendas are about it. Um, for me, it is just absolute and utter incompetence from individuals who have been there. And now we will see what happens with Cindy Parlow Cone in charge. I don't know if there's any understanding of how long of a term she will be, if there's a special election, what is kind of next for U.S. soccer. But she has an opportunity in front of her, and I mean, look, there's a lot of things on her plate immediately that we've wondered why the Federation hasn't gotten things done. The couple things they have gotten done, they've screwed it up royally. So there's a lot of things in front of her. I don't know how much she's going to get to do or how fast she's going to get up to speed, but there's a lot to do at the moment. And stopping this idiotic fight is number one, and this is something that would make sense for her to focus on immediately. But there's going to be more, and I don't know where things go from here. It's got to get fixed, and maybe because everything is on hold at the moment, maybe the proper attention can be put to it. Maybe we have somebody coming in from the outside of the Federation, and this is important in the sense that, you know, Gulati had been involved with U.S. soccer for a long time. And as much as he screwed up at the end and made mistakes at different times, I mean, everybody does. Anybody running an organization is going to make a mistake. It's going to happen. When he started with the organization, it was borderline amateur. And it was very different by the end. That's a credit to some of the good things that were done, but there were also things that were being done incorrectly all the way through, and that's just facts. So Cordero had been with the organization for a long time. He was somebody that you thought could keep things moving in the right direction and maybe fix some of the things that had gotten off track. Well, didn't happen. He took them more off track. Cindy Parlow Cone comes in from the outside of that. She hasn't been a Federation lifer. You know, former player for the women's national team, former professional player, played here for the Atlanta Beat, coach, been involved in the NWSL. You've got somebody with a completely different perspective now overseeing the actions of the Federation. That could be a very good thing. Hopefully there are some people who understand the politics and some of the things that you have no way to know from the outside about how an organization functions. Hopefully there's some people who can be of assistance in the right way and not take this off track again, and can help, not direct her perspective because you want that outsider perspective, but help deal with some of the things that anybody coming into a new organization would need to learn and pick up as you go.
Julie Foudy and Mia Hamm have both expressed publicly that, you know, Cindy Parlow Cone, you know, give her a chance, you know, because of her background in the sport, because of everything that she's done, give her a chance in her position as the interim to get things steered in the proper direction. Ellen Reynolds this morning on Twitter, seriously, did they not read those statements aloud before filing those documents? How can these people have so little self-awareness?
They read it. There's no other way around it. I mean, I'm sorry, the president of the federation cannot say that they didn't know what the legal strategy of the federation was going to be. If they literally can say that, if that is correct, then okay, they're not insensitive, they are just completely and utterly incompetent. Because that's the job. That's what you ran for. That's why you said, vote for me for president of this organization, because I'm going to make things right. I'm going to do things the right way. I'm going to fix things. And then you're not going to read an important legal document. You're not going to, direct the legal strategy of how to deal with one of the most important things that your federation is dealing with currently. Come on. They read it. They knew. He knew. He had to know. And what's unbelievable for me is that he could direct that and he could sign off on that after spending the time that he did with the women's national team at the World Cup, where he was very involved and the players appreciated his support. I mean, Megan Rapinoe went out on a limb in New York at the celebration parade. Rapinoe went out on a limb and tried to build a bridge with him on the mic about getting this resolved and getting this done right. To be able to do that and be involved and get the plaudits and get the TV time and be part of the celebrations and all that, and then not even a year later sign off on statements basically saying that they are not skilled and they don't have the talent or whatever you were implying, let alone what they actually said, is incredible. It's incredible that somebody would do that. And let's be real. He's never going to have another, important job in soccer again. It's not going to happen. It's not. It's completely gone for Carlos Cordero. And he ran on a platform of saying that he was going to be able to change things because he understood how the organization worked. Well, he lied. I mean, he flat out lied because he didn't try to change anything. He made it worse.
Michael Head this morning says he just wants to know, can we just disband the dysfunctional U.S. Soccer Federation? Not happy with not developing a competitive men's program. They now seem intent on tearing down the most successful program in the world. Morons.
No, there's multiple different things to this. The federation is not making the men's program not be competent. That's not all on the federation. The federation, it should be overseeing the big picture things. Could they make better hires and different things? Sure. But how many times in any sport or organization do we see a wrong hire made for a coach, or a general manager? It happens all the time. People get things wrong. That I'm going to cut some slack there. But for this, there's no excuse. There's no excuse at all. I mean, if you miss on a coach, fine. Other people have hired Jurgen Klinsmann. Other people have hired Bruce Arena. Greg Berhalter, it's early. It's very early. We'll see what happens with him. Developing talent, yeah, there's things that can be better. Obviously, there's lots of things in all this that can be better. But that's a whole different conversation. You don't disband a federation over that. You don't disband it over this because it's not going to help the people that need the federation and they need their organization and need the resources and all those kinds of things. But you've got to clean it out. And I think a lot of the outdated old school ways of thinking just have to go. Because that's what Cordero sold to everybody who voted for him, was that he recognized that there were things that needed to change. He had been involved in the organization as a vice president. He knew what could be done to change it. He was involved and important in ensuring that the World Cup was coming here in 2026, which is a very big deal. And we've talked about that when it came to hiring a U.S. soccer general manager on the men's side and ultimately slowing down the hire of the coach and all those things. The World Cup was a big deal. And he continued that on and got it done. All right. That's it. I don't know where else the thing was going to go, to be honest, but yes, he didn't run that one off the track. He ran everything else off the track. And he said it would be different. So he was a politician who lied. Shocking, I know, but that's what it's turned into. Uh, in terms of, I mean, starting another federation, it's not quite that simple, and it has been something that has been talked about over the decades and decades and decades. It's not realistic. I do have a lot of hope for Cindy Parlow because of her experience that she knows enough about the way the Federation works, but also doesn't come in with the same thoughts of people who've been there forever. It's not about, you know, protecting a role and playing politics in the same way. It's not that. Being the vice president was the first federation role that she's held outside of the coaching realm and things like that. So I have hopes that she'll come in with a fresh perspective and work to change things. And I think now they're going to have to. There's just no way around it because let's look at the people who have been there for a long time that are now gone. Cordero gone. Dan Flynn gone. Jay Berhalter gone. So you're taking really the three most powerful people in the federation, and they're gone. Now it's Cindy Parlow Cone and empty spots that have to be filled and have to be filled quickly, and that's got to be one of the first things that she looks to do. I think you've got the sponsors of the organization who ultimately put a lot of pressure on U.S. Soccer to either get rid of Carlos Cordero or for him to fix this, and he opted just to run the other direction. There's some speculation from Grant Wall that maybe Nike got involved ultimately at the end. They didn't come out publicly like Coca-Cola did, like others did, but maybe they put the hammer down behind the scenes and said he's got to go. That's a lot of money that will direct this. So I think Cindy Parlow Cone has a not a coalition maybe yet, but at least she has an initiative to push forward and make these changes and put the right people in place, fresh people, new people who don't come in with the baggage that all these other folks have had. And I have a lot of hope that this can actually be a new era for the Federation because it's desperately needed. I mean, you've got state associations that are in trouble. You've got, you know, a million and one acronyms in the youth game. You've got the issues with the women's national team, and you would think that between Cindy Parlow Cone, Kate Markgraf in big roles here, and even Ernie Stewart in a big role, I think you would expect that this is going to get resolved. That's good. That's a big step. You've got other legal cases you've got to deal with now, and you've got other things out there that you've got to deal with and try to find a way forward. I hope that people will be willing to give her the opportunity to try to fix things because that's what's needed right now. More fighting and more, going to the courts and more nonsense because somebody doesn't get their way has to stop. I mean, there are legal cases that are valid. Obviously, this one about pay, we've talked about it inside and out. There's lots of things in there that are valid. There's also lots of things with the situation that are complicated, and I hope that now you've got people who can be adults about it and get it done. There's lots of frivolous lawsuits out there as well. The whole North American Soccer League thing at this point. I mean, nonsense at this point. Absolute nonsense. Like, get it done or get it dealt with or somehow resolve the thing and move on because all those things are holding the game back. I hope that new people involved can do that. So she needs to be given a chance. She needs to hire the people that need to be in these roles like CEO. There are things that have to get done, but having somebody new gives me hope that it can actually get done the right way.
Jack Prendergast this morning, he says his 2 cents on the USSF. Cordero needed to go, but it seems like he's the fall guy, in quotes, for the rest of the leadership, and I'm still not holding my breath on meaningful change for now. It's good, but the Federation still has a long way to go.
Yeah, but Jack, this is the thing, and this is what we always do. It's like, okay, this is a good step, but nothing's going to change. We have to at some point have hope that things are going to change. We have to, because if every move that happens, it's like no, it's all going to be the same. It's all going to be the same. Well, then why make a move? Why do anything? Because it's always going to suck. Like that, we can't think that way anymore. Honestly, it doesn't do any good. You have somebody who has no history in Federation politics who is now in charge of the Federation. That's a huge change. I mean, honestly, you're going back to the days of God. I mean, I have to go back and look at the presidential roster. Gulati was there for so long. I'm trying to remember who all was before him. You're going back to probably I don't know. I mean, you're definitely going back to before MLS. I mean, you're going back to the dark ages in a lot of ways of U.S. soccer, where you didn't have professional soccer to like have somebody with this fresh of a perspective. Because even somebody like Alan Rothenberg, when he came in
Yeah, I was going to mention
the early
Rothenberg. Yeah,
'90s, but he had experience in the old North American Soccer League. It wasn't like he didn't know what was going on. It wasn't like he was completely disconnected from it. So, I mean, this is probably the person with the least Federation baggage that they've ever had since they've been in at all modern. So that's a big difference. You have to have some hopeful thoughts about this that it can change. Because if not, if we're all so jaded that it's just well, it doesn't matter. It's also broken. So, well then, I mean, why get excited about anything? Like why get excited about the sport? Because it's just going to suck in the end anyway. And it doesn't have to be the case. You have somebody now who can change it. The runway is wide open. You don't have a CEO with a whole bunch of power. You don't have a CEO. You don't have Jay Berhalter in there with a whole bunch of power creating a toxic environment in the workplace. Gone. You've got as clean of a slate as you could hope for positive change. And that's what you have to fight for now. Not be jaded and think that it's all just going to suck and be status quo. Now you actually have the opening to create the organization that it should have evolved into decades ago. At least a decade ago. As the game is completely different now than it was 25 years ago in the United States. Now you've got the opening to do it. It's free of baggage, as free as it can be. I mean, are there people in different positions that bring baggage to it? Sure. Are there people who have biases? Sure. Are there people who have their own agendas? Yeah. If you're a commissioner of MLS and you're on the board, of course you're going to be looking out for MLS's best interests. Just like USL would, just like the NWSL would, just like the NASL did when they were involved. Don't think that they were the altruistic ones that weren't thinking about anything but the greater good of the game. Come on, don't give me that crap. So you've got people that are there because it's an organization that has a bunch of different constituencies. But now at the top, you have the widest of openings to actually bring in people that can look at things differently, do things differently, bring a different perspective. That has to create hope. It has to.
Ricky Ricardo in this morning. He says maybe our new USSF president, with her ties locally, won't get a game scheduled here with the USMNT for the first time in forever.
She's got a lot bigger things to worry about than that one. And I don't know exactly how that goes with picking it. Her ties to Atlanta are not that strong, by the way. She played here professionally for a few years. But her ties are probably into other locations, more importantly. But, does it, we'll go big picture with it. Does it mean that maybe the old school way of just going to certain places because you worked with certain people, do those things kind of get washed away? Yeah, absolutely could. Absolutely could. But there are far bigger things to deal with. So a couple bits of information here. Cindy Parlow Cone will serve as president until next year. The election will be held at the next National Council meeting in Atlanta. Be very interesting to fill the final year of Cordero's 4-year term. So she is in charge until that, which I believe is in January or February of 2021. In 22, another election for U.S. Soccer president will be held with the 4-year term running from 22 to 26. which will end just before the country is slated to co-host the World Cup. Great timing. Great, set there. Maybe that can be changed because that's kind of stupid. Um, Obviously, you have the labor battles with the women's national team as a big, big, big priority here. I'm trying to think what other things besides staffing is gonna fall to her at the moment. Um, Man, I mean it's a tough gig because it might only be a year, well, less than a year. And now
Yeah.
you've got all the other things going on with the game basically being ground to a halt because of the coronavirus. So you'll have the time to maybe focus on structure that you wouldn't ordinarily have, but it's going to be really difficult and complicated. I just hope that she can go in and really push to get this done. Really push to get things done and get this organization on a different, footing going into the next year. Let's go back real quick just to the election that put Cordero in charge. Because a lot of people have pointed fingers at the Athletes Council who ended up supporting Cordero in this. You had Kathy Carter, who was the CEO of Soccer United Marketing prior to stepping down. She was running for president, and you had Eric Winalda running for president. You had Kyle Martino running for president. You had other athletes who Hope Solo. I'm trying to remember who else. Those were the three that I kept coming back to that were running for president that didn't have experience either in the federation politics and governing body of it. Um, if I remember correctly, it came down to Cordero and Carter, and that was the final two. It went 3 rounds in the voting, and it ultimately fell to Cordero. There was no groundswell of support realistically for anybody else other than Cordero. And I think now, if you try to rewrite history, it's not really being fair. There were a lot of questions about Carter at that point, which I do think were unfair. She was coming from Soccer United Marketing, and people, I think, have tried to paint Soccer United Marketing as some evil entity. It's not. It's a marketing company that was created to help Major League Soccer and the U.S. Soccer Federation and has done its job and has made both entities more money than they were making beforehand and has done a lot of good things. Are there things that now, because of what it's done, does it have some power and some sway? Yeah, it does. That's kind of how the world works. I don't really know what else to tell you. Um, the athletes that were running had some interesting ideas, and some had some really good ideas. And I wish, and this is what I believe we talked about on the show at the time, I had hopes that Cordero, because I think he alluded to it and said it at the time, would find a way to keep Kyle Martino and Eric Winalda and Hope Solo involved and get their input and see what ideas they had that could be done. And I don't think any of that ever happened. I think that was all a bunch of crap. It didn't happen from what we know, and he went on to do what he wanted to do. And he got the World Cup done, great for him, and then he screwed everything else up. So, Uh, it wasn't a great. There wasn't like what some other candidate. I think now to like throw shade at the Athletes Council, they didn't pick the worst candidate over some outstanding, wonderful idea that everybody was behind. That wasn't the case. There was nobody that really had any momentum outside of Cordero. And he was looked at as probably the most qualified of the batch, which I think he was. He just failed in his job.
And was it Angela Huclus who said that she removed herself because she thought she could do more as an outsider than she could as being associated with an insider panel?
It would make sense. I mean, it, it's hard. Like all of this stuff is really difficult to figure out what the best way to deal with it is. And a lot of people are gonna get bent out of shape. I've seen a lot of campaigning about the athletes council, Um, and a lot of insulting things being said about the Athletes Council for not putting Cordero in, but basically being the block that put him into the spot. They didn't go out and campaign for him. They voted the way that they voted. I don't know what other clear direction there was to go. Because if you go back to that time, I mean, it's easy to say things now. It's easy to say, oh, well, that was a bad idea. Well, okay, well, then what was the other idea at the time? There really wasn't one. There just wasn't. Um, he lied. I mean, let's be real. He said he was going to do things, and he didn't. That's that's what happened. Flat out. He said there would be change. There wasn't change. None of the things he said happened. He got the World Cup done. Okay. I don't know how much true competition there was, but got it done. Outside of that, everything else that he said didn't happen. And that's on him for basically lying. I mean, let's get down to it. That's what it was. Hookleys did say she was the vice chair of the Athletes Council during that election. She didn't run for re-election. She believed the organization needed change throughout, not just in the president's position, which 100%. Her quote that she gave to Paul Tenorio at the Athletic was, "This is something that goes deeper than this current board, this current president, this current membership group. This is systemic. This is an institutionalized manifestation of what's been happening over the years since the existence of the women's national team. There's more to it than even just that, in my opinion. The it's not just this issue with the women's national team. There are many other things that the federation has to get better at." Hughley's also said, "A big part of my decision of not running again with the Athletes Council was to allow myself more of a leadership role within soccer by not being part of the board. It was very challenging and frustrating because there has always been this underlying tone that you've seen current players talk about. It's always been there. This is not something that is the Athletes Council's fault for electing Carlos. It's beyond Carlos. It's beyond the Athletes Council. It's something that is part of the culture. It's deeper. It's been very challenging to shift and move that needle for progress and to be heard. If the culture changes, and this is now the opportunity for this to happen, it makes it a lot easier for people trying to do the right things to see those effects coming to fruition." So, again, this is all specifically about the women's national team. And yes, like, all of this is correct. It's always been looked at as secondary to the men's national team. And that's stupid. That's just dumb, flat out. And a lot of the outdated thinking, a lot of the outdated things that have been said, a lot of the lies that have been said, a lot of the misinformation that's been said, a lot of that stems from this. Like, it didn't completely come out of thin air. But there are more things going on than just this with the Federation. And if the Federation can't be only about fixing this one thing, they have to fix this thing. It has to be right. But there's so much more. There's so much more. I mean, I don't know at this stage. When you look, if you follow Georgia soccer at all, and you follow the Georgia State Association and what's going on, you've got a bunch of clubs that have broken away and done their own elite competition, and now they're expanding. And you have far fewer players registering with the Georgia State Soccer Association, which means far less revenue, which means other programs for other clubs are going to be affected. You've got this kind of stuff happening at the state level. I'm sure Georgia's not the only one that's having these issues. That is going to be a problem. The Federation, that's who the state association is a part of the U.S. Soccer Federation. I don't think there's been any leadership from the Federation in those types of situations and helping mitigate those types of situations. And now you're going to have problems underneath that because of the lack of leadership. There are things with the women's national team. There are things with, you have a CBA that has to be negotiated on the men's side. That's an issue because they've been playing on the CBA that was negotiated in 2011 that expired in 2018. You don't have that done. I mean, you don't have a general manager on the men's side now. Like, there's so many things that are there to be done that have to be fixed. I believe the contract with Soccer United Marketing is coming up. Like, there's so many different things that are just, it's scary how flimsy the Federation feels right now. It can't just be about this women's national team issue. That has to get solved so you can actually deal with everything else going on. That's why Cindy Parlow Cohn's job is going to be so hard.
Katie Weaver in this morning particularly enjoyed a couple of sentences from Dax McCarty, re the U.S. soccer mess, and she uses the hashtag respect. McCarty said, on a basic human level, the sexist, misogynistic, and tone-deaf arguments made by U.S. soccer in their latest legal filings are horrifying. Tobin Heath has more skill in her pinky toe than I do in my entire body. Some of you smartasses will probably say that's not impressive, but my point still stands. Equality and respect. These women who have changed narratives and inspired multiple generations of young people in all facets of life deserve both.
Yeah, I want to make something clear that I see a lot of just I don't know unrealistic ways of looking at things that get dropped a lot when it comes to this. A lot of people want to bring up, oh, they lost to a U15 team, blah, blah, so why do we care, blah, blah, blah. A bunch of stupid, idiotic things. Um, I think we can have an adult conversation here that there are differences between a man and a woman in terms of being an athlete, an elite athlete. And there are differences in speed, there are differences in strength that are just physical differences. And that's why, yes, you can have a U15 team that can win a game and blah, 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 and a bunch of nonsense. But when you start talking about skill, Dax McCarty is 100% correct. Tobin Heath is one of the most skilled soccer players you're going to find. Marta is one of the most unbelievably skilled players that I've ever seen, period. Um, Cindy Parlow, I loved her game. Very talented, like big number 9 who could be devastating in the air but had quick feet. I really enjoyed her game. Mia Hamm, I wanted to play like Mia Hamm. Period. Um, the argument was insulting and idiotic and stupid and bad PR and created so much mistrust from anybody involved in the women's game that the Federation was making. All of that was horrendous. Stop with the nonsense about they don't deserve it because they don't do the same thing. Stop with the nonsense about the financial side of it because you're not paying attention in the United States. We're not talking worldwide. We're talking about the United States. The women draw fans. The women draw TV ratings. The women are a very important part of the overall world that is soccer in the United States. Period. And if you can't grasp that, I can't help you. If you want to try to fall back on some nonsense about a U15 team, go ahead, make yourself feel good about it, share it with your friends, but don't throw that stuff in my face because it is idiotic. There is no argument when you look at just the She Believes Cup that is just completed. Look at the stands at a building like Red Bull Arena that the local team that the building is named for can't fill up, but the women can. And you want to tell me they don't matter. Stop your nonsense. Stop that idiotic crap. That's number one. Stop trying to compare. Stop trying to compare. Just because there are physical differences doesn't mean they are not worthy of the same level of support. If you don't enjoy the women's game, don't watch. That's fine. I don't like to watch certain teams because I don't enjoy how they play. Not men or women, just soccer, period. There's certain teams that I don't want to watch because I'm bored to tears because I don't like their approach. If you don't like the women's game, whatever excuses you have for it, that's fine. Don't watch. Don't try to justify that with a bunch of crap and say that they don't deserve support and they don't deserve to be paid and blah, 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 and all this kind of nonsense. It's a bunch of just idiotic stuff. You're going to have to get to what the NBA's done, to what I believe the NFL has done, and get to a revenue sharing model, period. That's where you're going to have to get, because then there's no arguments about it. You get to a revenue sharing model. Now, for the Federation, that's something that they're going to have to figure out how to do effectively, because they have always sold the sponsorship rights, the TV rights, all those things together for all their properties, which makes sense. It does. But if they can't, and in this case, maybe they can't because, as we've talked about, it's a very different structure with what the U.S. women's national team gets versus what the men's get. You're talking salary versus no salary because of the differences at the club level. You're talking differences in benefits. You're talking different things. And if you want to keep that, okay, that's fine. Then what you need to do is figure out how to effectively value within your group sale of all of your assets, effectively put a value on both sets of properties, or just flat out split it down the middle, which is probably where you should be because that's where it roughly seems to be. If you want to quibble about 52% versus 48 or 55 versus 45, whatever, fine. Okay, if you want to get to that point, that's fine. You want to split it down the middle? Okay, whatever you do. And then once you get the pool of money that you're working with to pay your players with, then you can differentiate how you do it. If it is more in guaranteed money and a salary versus more in a per game type of situation, okay, fine. But you're talking about the pool of money being what it is. That's what you have to get to. Because anything else is going to create arguments that there's no way to get done. Like, figure out how much money you're working with on both sides and then do it. And then negotiate it. Say, we have X dollars. And you want some salary and some benefits. You want some things that are different from the men's side. Okay, cool. You know what you're working with. You do it. That's it. And I think the Federation would be very smart to keep doing what they're doing in terms of selling it, because I think it's the best approach with sponsorships, with TV. I don't think they benefit from selling them separately. I don't think the women benefit from that. It needs to all be together because that's the Federation's job, is to support all aspects of the game. But then you take the amounts and you divide them equally. If Nike pays $100 million, oh, I'm just making up a figure. They pay $100 million. However that is divided up among the Federation's departments, it is done equally because that's what the Federation's job is supposed to be. And then you take that money into a pot, and then you know what you're working with, and you can then negotiate with the Players Association on the women's side, and say, this is the amount we have to work with. How do you want to divide it up? That's probably the way this has to go. Hopefully, now that you have some different people deciding this and not making idiotic legal arguments, maybe you can actually get there.
We can now add the Masters to the list of events that have been postponed, along with the National Women's Amateur and the Drive, Chip, and Putt National Finals. Fred Ridley, the chairman of Augusta National, has just come out with a statement.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of figured it would happen. I think they probably wanted to wait longer. It has been postponed, correct? They have not said canceled for 2020.
Yeah,
okay.
Postponed.
Yeah, which would make sense if you look at the calendar with the tour, and the Masters is separate from the PGA Tour, but the PGA Tour stops that week, obviously, because the Masters is the important thing. At least stops in there. They're not trying to compete with it. If the Masters can get played in 2020, they will find a time to do it, and they'll do it. That's just, it's such a huge event. They will do it at a different time if they can, and we will see, because that's the stuff that none of us really know. None of us know the timeline it's going to happen. There's no way to know. Our buddy Tofka is trying to get back to the United States.
Yes, saw that.
He's in Europe. He is in Sweden 2 days ago, and now he's in Warsaw, Poland, and he has purchased a flight quickly to try to get back. Looks like he's going to be okay in getting back. So, Tofka, we're thinking about you, man. I was wondering what your next update was going to be.
Let's see. Also on the board this morning, Daniel Price has come in. He said, in referencing the match here in Mexico City, he highly anticipated the match, but as all the news unfolded, he couldn't focus on the match whatsoever. We're in for some trying times right now. The world has basically changed overnight.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was hard. Calling it was hard. I haven't gone back to listen to any of it. I don't want to. because I was really trying hard early on to kind of lose myself in it. And
Yeah.
knowing what could be happening, I was just trying to focus on every aspect of the match and get lost in it for a while. And then as the outcome was pretty much cleared up, I mean, probably in the last 5 minutes or so, because I don't really feel like breaking it down a whole lot. We might do some of that on stoppage time later today. We'll be on at 2 o'clock. Facebook.com/929 the game. But uh, once the outcome was decided, then it kind of hits you that, well, this might be the last game for a while, and hopefully it's not a long while. I do have hope that this will pass. I mean, you start to look around the world and you find some glimmers of hope about how different countries have handled it and dealt with it, and there's a timeline ahead of us. It's going to take some time, but you'd like to think that with these very strong measures and faster than others have done them, you look at the timeline of the spread, and I think what a lot of experts have said is that the U.S. is anywhere from now 12 to 16 days behind how it spread in Italy, for example. And the delay that now we're seeing European leagues just now stop. And, they were playing games throughout the spread, and it probably, in some ways, made it worse, along with others. That's just one aspect of society. But in the United States, it feels like it is ahead of the curve in terms of shutting things down and limiting these large gatherings that can't help with any of this. So I have hope that maybe this will be a little bit faster, and maybe that 30 days isn't a crazy number. Maybe that's at least 30 days to get a plan in place to start back, and that's what I am hopeful for to see in the coming weeks is a plan, because everything on hold, I mean, it has to be right now, but that lingers and that will have an effect on people. Just mood, not even getting into logistics, just mood. If you don't know when things are going to get back to normal, that drags on you. It does. Hopefully, once we get past maybe the first week, have a better sense of where this is going to go, and plans can be made for things to get back to normal. Because, I mean, I've seen plenty of people say it, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, John, because, like, I've seen plenty of people say, like, well, sports aren't important right now. I completely and utterly disagree. Sports are incredibly important because sport brings people together, and sport brings people together in, emotional ways. Sport creates family. We've seen it with supporters groups here in Atlanta. We've seen it we saw it on Wednesday. There's a
Mm-hmm.
Club America fan who was stuck in a wheelchair, could not get up the stairs to the seating area at the Estadio Azteca, and members of the Atlanta United supporters groups helped carry her up. Um, that's the power of sports. That's just one very small aspect of it. Sports are needed, especially now
Mm-hmm.
when we all need a distraction from all this crap and scary stuff. We need a distraction. We need something positive, and sport can provide that. So when people try to tell you that sports aren't important, I think it's a really short-sighted way of looking at it. Are they? Are these large gatherings needed right now? No. That's the important thing. It's not about why. It's about you don't need people gathering in these large numbers at the moment. And these are the right decisions that sports are making. I'm glad the Masters made this decision when they did. It didn't drag out. I hope that there is a plan emerging sooner rather than later for a return to normalcy, because that will help everybody's mood, outlook, and just general anxiety levels, because it's scary right now.
Well, let's take the current context away from it. Let's go back 3 weeks. Let's go back a month. What does sports mean? It gives you that sense of community. It gives you that sense of belonging. It gives you that attachment. It gives you that sense of pride. It gives you that sense of all of these things that that you can root for and that you have this vested interest in. And that is what it's always been. You mentioned community. You mentioned all of these different things that sports can mean. And it's regardless of the size of the town that you're talking about. It's regardless of the size of the team that you're talking about. I mean, here on the network, we talk about everything from grassroots to a bunch of different leagues in the table to what it means to young athletes, male or female, towns large and small, leagues in the ladder, depending on division, could be, the top, it could be, NPSL, could be UPSL, could be NISA, could be whatever. For every single level that folks are attached to what's there for them, it gives them that sense of community and rooting interest and all these things that we talk about. And what we have now, it's that pause where we focus on family and we focus on making sure that the family that we have, whether it's blood or otherwise, that we're all okay, that we get through all of this together. But when we're well and we're checked off and everything is fine and all the boxes get figured out and we can resume athletic support. I mean, think about the last time that the nation had a pause and what it meant to have sports be a part of that community and to be rooting for that stuff all over again. It means a lot. And when you have those moments of sport, when you have those moments of community that you can sit there and rally around and root for and be a part of, for those that say it doesn't matter, just think about moments in your past. That's all I would ask. Just look at those moments from your life as you've grown older. Sports doesn't matter. That to me, it's incorrect because of what it can mean across the board.
Yeah, I mean that's just the way it all feels, and that's not even getting into the people who work in the sports industry. And
Mm-hmm.
look, there's a lot of people who work in the sports industry, us included, who are not on like huge salaries. Like
We
salaries.
do it because we love what we do.
Yeah, salary's a funny thing about it.
Yeah.
It's going to affect everybody. I mean, it's going to affect all the people when you go to the stadium, the people you see at the ticket office, the people you see, ushers, the people you see at the concessions. A lot of people go to the same bar at the stadium every game. You get to know the bartenders. I mean, it's going to affect all of those people. It's going to affect photographers. It's going to affect media. It's going to affect like any of us who make any portion of our living or all of our living from sport. And it's a scary time. It's a very scary time because none of us know when things are going to get back to normal. None of us know how it's going to go. So when I see people say that, it's insulting. Sport is more important than people think. It doesn't mean it's the most important thing. It doesn't mean that it should be continuing at a time where it's too risky to do so, and it's going to potentially hurt not just the people that are actually in the building, but people that those folks come in contact with. Like, no, it should not be going on right now. That's not what I am saying. But to just minimize it and say it's not important, so it doesn't matter, and yeah, there's obviously nobody should have any feelings about it not going on. Stop. That's ridiculous.
It's a unifier and it's an engine all at the same time. There are times where you just have to take pause, and for people to sit there, to say it doesn't matter. You're not taking into account everyone who is a part of the event day. It's about the Yellow Jackets. It's about security. It's about the ticket taker. It's about the concessionaire. It's about the person who is doing something that you don't necessarily think about on the face, but there are so many different layers and levels to make sure that the event that you're at, the teams that you like, the universities that you follow, all of these different aspects to make it work. and there are a lot of moving parts to it all. And to say that it's not important, it is insulting. It's short sighted, and I think what you're also doing is you're not looking at it in the three dimensions that you should because of everyone that it impacts.
Yeah, it's just flat out insulting when that stuff gets said. So we will again we will see how all this goes. Let's get back to Twitter and what people are thinking on a Friday.
Sure, Riley Maletsky's in this morning. Says he's been thinking and would expect the way we go about daily life will be affected even after all of this calms down, such as remote work health practices, how restaurants operate, etc. Riley's question is, what changes about how we experience sports?
Don't know. I don't know. Hopefully, not a ton directly. I mean, you don't you hope that the power of community and things coming together are still the same. You hope that it's still what it has been, and I don't think there's a reason why it shouldn't be. Um, I think sports one of the things that can pretty much continue once this is dealt with as as it has. I can't think of anything directly that would affect it.
I think the sense of community stays the same. I don't think we treat each other differently. I think that maybe we might be a little more cognizant of surroundings and things like that, but I don't anticipate a whole lot changing. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean that's stuff that should have been better to begin with, um, and hopefully that will be a very strong positive that comes out of this. But yeah, I don't think the experience should change in any huge way when it comes to sport. I really hope that it doesn't. I hope that it can get back to as normal as it can be as fast as it can.
Katie Weaver, back to our hour one discussion about schedule sliding and things like that. She says, I think you can cancel or postpone the Euros, extend the league or UCL seasons into May or June. Liverpool fans sweating that their historic season will have an asterisk also love the suggestion of playoffs for the remainder of pro rel slots.
Yeah, you're gonna have to figure out some logistics. There has reportedly been conversation about both the Euros and Copa America being pushed to 2021. I don't know what that would do for the women's Euros that are scheduled for 2021. Maybe they can go ahead and continue. I can stagger it, find a way to make it work. I don't know. I don't know the logistics of that. I think you're going to have to because on an optimistic front, if leagues can get completed, you're going to need that extra time, and that would cut into training camps for the Euros for Copa America. So I think those have to be pushed. Those you might have to lose them this year, and if they get played next year, they get played next year. That definitely would affect FIFA's plans for the enlarged Club World Cup in 2021, and that's fine. That was all a weird pipe dream anyway. So move those national team competitions back. That'll create a little more space in the calendar, and this is all assuming that this is a disruption, but one that maybe in 30 days we're able to figure out a way forward from. So, you're going to have to figure out some of the logistics once we know. And this is just looking at it now and hoping that 30 days gives us an answer. Yeah, you might have to have enlarged playoffs for pro rel spots. You might have to think outside the box. And that's not something that some leagues and federations have done a good job of. It's not something that they have been able to handle very well. They're going to have to because it's not going to be normal in terms of finishing these seasons. You might not have enough time to finish them. You might have, even once things predominantly get back to normal, you might still have some lingering issues with different teams and different things. And everybody might not be able to get back to normal at the same time. And it's going to be hard. So if that means cutting games, if that means cutting non-essential matches, if matches don't affect the overall positioning of the table, they don't get played. You might have to do some things like that. It might end up when we look back at this in 20 or 30 years and look back at the standings for this season, it might look weird. Well, that's just what it's going to be because yeah, as you said, this is sport is a business, it's an engine, and there's a lot of money that has to be sorted out. I mean, that's why some of these delays of canceling games have dragged on as long as it has because there's a lot of financial losses. There's a lot of things that are going to be affected. So you want to try to prevent as much of that as you can, and you're going to have to sort out one of the biggest things that is an economic driver, and that's promotion relegation in European leagues. That means you have to deal with the competitive integrity and as best you can, and not have a team end up getting relegated or losing hundreds of millions of dollars because of scheduling being hard. You're going to have to try to figure this out. It's not going to be easy. And if that means you have to change the formats a little bit, I mean, the Bundesliga idea of not relegating anybody, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, then it gets complicated going forward, but if that's the way to do it, that's the way to do it. And you have to solve it. It might mean that leagues look different for the next couple of years. It might mean a lot of different things. And I hope that people are forward thinking enough to find the best solution you can.
Percy Herrera this morning says it's a great opportunity to get familiar with Palo Neto. It's their time to thrive.
Yeah, at least in remote ways. Yeah, the EMLS Cup that was going to be at South by Southwest that was canceled. I don't know what else is going to be on the agenda with those types of things, but yeah, esports. It's going to get interesting. I mean, in general, like, what is ESPN going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got how many channels and how many hours of programming that they've got to fill, and they don't have games to fill it with. And I mean, you can only put on so many studio shows, and I mean, I guess you're gonna go into the archives a bit and show some classic games and matches and events, and that's great. And at the end, what do you do? I mean, you've got advertisers to answer to. That's all part of it, and that's
The
all where
phrase of the day, make good.
this stuff's complicated. I
Yeah,
mean, sure, make it about how and when and what
exactly.
way. I mean, yeah, great, but how? And that's the
Mm-hmm.
stuff nobody knows at this point. So I don't know. I mean, esports is actually something that it is their time to shine. Percy's correct. I'll be curious to see how they handle it, what they do with it, and if your mainstream ESPNs and stuff do something with it because it's an opportunity. It absolutely
Yeah.
is.
Ricky Ricardo with some levity and with a question this morning. First, the levity. And he says, I wonder if John's still doubting the existence of Inter Miami since they still haven't had a home game and won't for an even longer period of time.
I'm sure he is.
Well, I mean, I debated having Pizarro on my fantasy team, so I guess that means that I've come around.
Well, Pizarro scored me points on the fantasy team, so it's real.
And then he asks, what are our thoughts on the USL saying they wouldn't participate in Open Cup?
Well, they didn't say that. That's been rumored. First off, I'm very wary of any statements like that at this point because nobody knows what's going to happen. Could it happen? Yeah, because let's follow the line of thinking. The league has not made a statement on that. First off, unless I missed it. Did I miss it?
I haven't seen anything.
I saw rumors about it. I believe Jeff Roeder of The Athletic said that that's what he was hearing. Let's try to figure out why that would be the case. It hasn't been announced yet, but let's try to figure out why that would be a line of thinking. We've mentioned how MLS versus Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, others, has a higher need for match day revenue than others because they don't make as much on TV and they derive such a big percentage of their revenue from match day. Take that and multiply that need by about 50 and you get USL Championship and lower divisions because you don't have TV money. Like I think USL Championship gets a fractional amount from ESPN to have the games on ESPN Plus and have some games on ESPN linear networks. Not enough to make a dent in the bottom line for teams. So it's all match day and sponsorship and everything that is just around a match day. So that's their number one priority. And depending on how long this goes before they can start their season, they've got to get their matches in. A budget for an independent USL Championship team or USL League One team is based on the number of games you play. You've got to play the games that you've budgeted for, or you're going to have some problems. And there's a lot of teams that, MLS teams, the ownership groups are a little different. Can they eat a year of losses, even substantial ones? Yeah, I think just about everybody could. And the way the league's structured, you've got support. Like you can do it. You can make it work. You can suffer through it. USL, you don't have that, and you've got a lot of independent teams that are probably in fairly precarious financial situations year to year anyway, let alone with potential loss of revenue like this year. So you've got to play your league games. USL or US Open Cup is a wonderful competition, but it doesn't change the bottom line for USL teams. It doesn't change their existence in terms of how much money they bring in. It doesn't. And if you have to sacrifice that because you have to get league games played and you have to get them played on midweek matches because even reduced match day revenue is better than none, well, you've got to miss out in the Open Cup if that's the case. I would hope that once all the leagues have figured out what their structure is going to be for 2020, once we have timelines, then the U.S. Open Cup can also try to find something resembling a structure. Maybe it means that not everybody participates in it that they usually do. Maybe it's only certain ones. I mean, the Open Cup it was played through World Wars, so hopefully they can find a way for it to be played at least in some form or fashion. But USL teams, if that is the mindset right now, first, it's super early for that to be the mindset. But second, yeah, I get it. I understand it because the league matches are the economic drivers, not Open Cup matches. So they've got to get those matches played to try to get anywhere close to the bottom lines that they had budgeted for in 2020.
Daniel and the Soccer for Good OG Joe Robbins along the same lines of thought, so I'll combine them. Daniel says sports bring people together to unite behind something, regardless of race, religion, political views, etc. It distracts from our daily lives and allows us to feel a part of something. It makes us feel normal. Humans are social beings. We need each other. With sports coming to a sudden halt, it disrupts people's lives, the workers, the fans, the players. It makes the future that much scarier and fills people with anxiety. Jill came in from behind and said, I believe that when we all get back together, there'll be a much greater appreciation for our soccer family, albeit with less hugs and more fist bumps. Hashtag soccer is life. Hashtag Atlanta es familia. Hashtag I miss you guys. Hashtag new normal.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it'll get back to hugs at some point. But yeah, it's definitely needed. And in a time like this, it's absolutely needed. I mean, not gonna lie, I got home yesterday and slept for as long as I could sleep. Woke up about 1 o'clock and then caught up on everything that had happened. Felt like over the last couple of days, every time I took a nap, crazy things would happen. I slept for a couple hours on Wednesday afternoon as the Champions League games were going on in Europe, and woke up to different things. I'm just like, geez, all right. But after that, it's like, all right, well, I need to go to the grocery store because I've been out of town for a few days and need to try to make sure have some different things. And, I'm not going crazy with hoarding like some people are because I think that's gotten completely out of hand. And it showed that it's getting out of hand when you go to the grocery store and you go to CVS, and it's just lots of empty shelves of things that you would not expect to be empty. And I mean, the grocery store, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of overwhelmed a little bit at multiple things. I mean, empty shelves of toilet paper and mostly empty shelves of like pasta and rice and scary. I never thought I'd see something like that. And also overwhelmed by a lot of people being kind of out of control and like just I don't know, kind of losing their thought for people around them and like just charging in and getting in front of people. And I mean, saw something on video about a fight that broke out over something at some grocery store. It's that's the stuff that's scary to me. Uh, Regardless of what you do or what your life situation is, like I think pretty much everybody in the world is struggling with this right now and in their own different ways. And you need to try to give people the benefit of the doubt and try to find a little bit of empathy for others right now as best you can. Because everybody's struggling, everybody's suffering with this, and everybody's freaking out about it. It's understandable. So, like, take that extra second when you go to a crowded store and the people who are ringing you up are stressed out and freaking out, and take that extra second to thank them for what they do, and
Yes,
take that extra
exactly.
second when you it's crowded and you almost bump into somebody or you bump into somebody to say sorry, and just take that extra second to think about others, please, as best you can, because that's what's needed right now.
And they're going through the same thing you are, you
Everybody
know?
is. Everybody is. That's the thing. Nobody isn't. So just try to think about other people as best you can right now.
And from the Washington Post, we can now add the Boston Marathon to the list, postponed until September.
Yeah, I
First time in
mean,
124 years.
that's that's just where it's at. Um, look, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is going to look like. I honestly was very hopeful when the 30 days was announced. I was glad they put some kind of a timeline on it. I think the NBA announcement led to the way it was worded led to a lot of people thinking, well, the season's over, everything's done, nothing's going to come back, and that created more just upset. And I don't think that was needed. I think putting a timeline, even if it's a hopeful one right now, is good. I don't know if games are going to be played in 30 days, but maybe in 30 days we know what is next. That's kind of where my hope is now. Um, I mean, just from an MLS perspective, since that's the league we talk about the most here, USL Championship's going to be roughly the same thing, although they'll have some extra games involved in this 30-day period because they don't take a break for the international break. I mean, right now it's a small number of games if you're just talking the 30 days, and I think you're probably going to have more games affected. But even 2 months, you've got that one international break. You're going to have games you're going to have to make up. It can be done and have a semi-normal season if it's 60 days. It can be done, and I hope, like I said earlier, I hope that leagues and events and governing bodies can. I hope that it's easy enough to figure this out in the next few weeks. That you can start to figure out planning for what normal will look like when it can look like normal. Because that will give people something to rally around and look towards and give some hope. Because that's what's needed. Everybody wants to get back to normal, and right now we don't know what normal will be, and we don't know when it will be that. And sports one of those things that until you don't have it like now, you don't think about how important it is in defining what normal is. So hopefully we can figure out what that's going to be at some point in the near future. But yeah, it might not be games in 30 days. It's hard to tell. There's no real answer to it. That's what's so hard about it is, events in April that are getting postponed. Does that mean that you won't have games in 30 days? It might not. It might. Does it mean that they're, maybe being proactive about postponing them or pushing them back? Could be. I don't think there's anybody out there that has the answers that isn't telling everybody. I think all the different agencies and leagues and events are trying to figure it out as they go and trying to figure out the best way forward. And if that means right now that they are being overly cautious, thank you. Do that so you don't, increase the risk right now. And maybe it will be faster than we're thinking. Maybe you'll be able to play the Masters in May. Maybe these things will happen. We have to. I think we have to try to hope for that. And those steps are going to be needed when they can be made.
And and when governing bodies and league administrators, you put a timetable on something, it gives you that first handbrake. It gives you that guidance to sit there and say, okay, this will be our first marker. And 30 days, it seems like a safe marker to put out there from the beginning of something when you don't know when the end result is actually going to be. I think that what that 30 days does, I think that, April 3, April 4, whatever you want to call it, it sits there and it's like, okay, that's our first marker. We'll reassess as we get closer to that first marker and then adjust. And I think that, if you just understand that going in, don't sit there and have that as a hard and fast rule for whatever competition you're attached to when you're looking at a particular timeline. Yeah, things are going to be different. Schedules are going to be different. But when you have that first handbrake that's out there, just understand going in that that's not your hard and fast rule. That's not something it's like, yeah, we'll hop in right at this date. Take that as your first guidepost going forward to whatever the new normal is.
A couple things out there logistically, as all MLS teams did. Atlanta United had no media availability today. The Children's Healthcare of Atlanta training ground was closed Friday, Saturday, Sunday to all players and staff. Monday, and this has been echoed by lots of different writers from around the league, MLS teams will be allowed to return to full training on Monday. We'll see what that looks like. There hasn't been any positive tests in MLS as of yet. Hopefully that will remain the case because then that can accelerate the process of training and being normal and being ready to start quicker. That's going to be one of the hard things for a lot of the different sports is, the longer the layoff is, then you're going to need some form of a preseason to get ready. I mean, if you're the NBA, for example, and we were kind of talking around this as things were breaking. The NBA, in terms of the playoff teams, it's pretty well defined who the 8 in each conference are going to be. You might not need to finish the regular season from that perspective, but you're going to need something if you come back just with the playoffs. If you come back and just do the playoffs, which is my guess would be a reasonable approach, you're still going to need something for those teams to have time to prepare. And if that means, you play a couple of the remaining regular season games as preseason contests or whatever, or they don't affect the stand. I don't know. I don't know what you do, but you're going to have something. We were talking to Jarrett Smith yesterday, and if you're, a pitcher in baseball, for example, like you can't go from starting spring training, stopping spring training, and then season's going to start in, I think they've delayed the season by 2 weeks. You can't just
Yeah.
ramp your arm up to be able to pitch. Like
No.
you're going to get hurt. Like there's logistical things in that. So the fact that as of now MLS teams are preparing to train on Monday, that gives you a little bit of hope that at least that ramping up process won't be as long there, and we'll see. It's a little bit different conversation with the NBA and with the NHL because of Rudy Gobert and now Donovan Mitchell and their positive tests, because then you're talking about arenas that are shared between the two leagues, and it's indoors, which is a different conversation than something that's outdoors, and it's hard. It's all going to be hard to figure out, but That's right now what it looks like is MLS teams will be returning to training on Monday, and we'll see where that takes it.
Word out of CONCACAF just now. They convened a conference call yesterday, the CONCACAF Council. Decision was made to suspend all upcoming CONCACAF competitions scheduled to take place over the next 30 days. The CONCACAF Council took these decisions, this is quoting from the press release directly, with the welfare of everyone involved in mind and in light of developing travel restrictions and public health guidance, the following competitions have been suspended with immediate effect. CONCACAF Champions League, 2020 CONCACAF Men's Olympic Qualifiers, the first round of the CONCACAF 2021 Gold Cup qualifiers due to be played in the March 2020 FIFA window, and the 2020 CONCACAF Caribbean Club Shield. And it says CONCACAF is committed to working with key stakeholders to consider options on how and when to reconvene these competitions, and any new decision will be communicated in due course.
The 30-day kind of delay timeline feels to be the best step at the moment, and we will see where it goes from there. On our end, let's. I want to open it up to you guys who listen. What you want from us? You know, I hope in some time that we'll be able to have maybe a little more fun with the show. It's not fun to have these kinds of shows. Hopefully, we'll be able to at least have an idea of what's coming down the road, and we can maybe do some look back kind of shows, maybe do some, tactical kind of shows, maybe do some best ofs, like in terms of, best teams in the league, things like that, whatever. Best teams in history, best players in history, whatever. Um, Let us know. Stuff like that. Just in general, what you want us to do. We haven't decided officially on anything yet in terms of like events that we have scheduled and such. I want to give that a little bit of time before we do. Obviously there's not going to be a run-up show tonight at the Brew House because there's no game on Saturday. Run-up shows will come back when we have games. Does that, maybe look a little different in the short term? Does it become a show just in the evening on a day during the week? Maybe it can. Hopefully it can. We want to, get Kelly involved and get her voice involved and figure that out. So we're figuring all that stuff out. I will go ahead and say I think it's safe to say that we're not going to have a soccer over there show on Monday night either. At least at the Brew House, we might have one in a normal Spreaker Skype fashion, and that's what we'll be shooting for. But we won't be having a live show. Any other live shows right now, just wait and give us a little bit of time to figure out what it looks like. There's no reason at this point for people to be coming together in a public place in any big fashion like that. I mean, if leagues are going to cancel, in my mind, we shouldn't be asking people to come out. We can still communicate with you guys and do shows and do things like that remotely. We don't want to put anybody at risk for anything. So that's kind of where we're at. But let us know we what you want us to do. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna be weird for anybody who does this kind of thing because there's not going to be games to talk about. There's not going to be transfer sagas to talk about. Everything's kind of just in flux in limbo. So let us know what you want us to do in terms of shows, and we will do the best we can.
Eric Englert has a bit of a suggestion.
Okay.
He says, let's use this time to catch at OSG Nelson up on all the pop culture references from the 90s and 2000s.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that would be dangerous. That would be
Sounds like
dangerous.
there's a lot of those.
Yeah, yeah, that would be very, very dangerous. Um, I mean, when I say that, I want people to understand. Like, I don't really have an intention of not doing shows at least as best we can. I don't know what they look like. I really don't. I don't know. Once we get past the initial kind of shock of things and then start to get into what things look like when they come back. Once we know, then that's an easy topic, and we start to figure that out, and we know what we're working with and all that. But I don't know what the content's going to look like at the moment, but yes, we're still planning on doing things and doing shows. We just won't be doing live shows and such. We'll see. I really don't know, but if there's topics you want us to get into, please give us a heads up, and we'll have some time to do that for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's about what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. It's about community, and it's about being here with everyone else. So I honestly was firmly anticipating that we were going to be doing shows on the network across the board, not knowing what the content was going to have in it, but that we were going to be here and we were going to continue to have conversations, and folks were going to continue talking with us on a daily basis. So that was kind of what I was thinking as well. Just what they look like. That's what's up in the air.
Yep. I mean, there's just no way to know. And I'm not going to make something up right now because that's one thing I've learned in the sporting world over the last few days is nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody has a true way of knowing what's going to happen. So, uh, we will be doing stuff. We just don't know what times exactly and how much and who and how, and it'll be something. We're not going anywhere, but yeah, I don't know what it looks like.
And Ricky Ricardo has already started diving in on top tens series and things like that. So folks, just send us suggestions like that, all the ideas, and we'll put them up on the community board and keep sharing with each other as to what you'd like to be talking about in this time.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Anything else on Twitter?
No, not at the moment. We've had folks commenting with each other and across the board, and so Chris Ashley, Ricky Ricardo have already started diving in with ideas for topics and programming and things like that. So it's good to have folks listening, and thanks for the kind words that everybody spread out yesterday about us and having a show and things like that. It was very, very humbling to see that kind of stuff come across the timeline. But yeah, Chris Ashley and Ricky Ricardo have already started the programming suggestions. So it's good stuff.
Well, we will keep that rolling. Tweet at us at Soccer Down here. Let us know, kind of what you're thinking as we go. You can also send us a message, direct message on Twitter. Those are open. If you're not following, you can still send a message there. You can also email soccerdownhere@gmail. I think you follow all of us at this point. Longshoe, OSG Nelson, Jared_Smith, Nick Alifi, the Kelly Francis, Just Talks Footy. You can all let us know what, kind of things. Once we get past the initial shock of all of it, I think when we can get into other types of stuff, we will, and give us some ideas on what you're looking for. But we will figure all that out as we go. That's pretty much where all of us are at this point with everything, let alone sports. So the biggest thing I would say, as we head into the weekend is, try not to panic, try not to lose your heads, think about other people around you, practice all the things that the very intelligent people in the medical world are telling us to do. Telling us all that stuff for a reason. Social distancing is a real thing. Don't put yourself and others at risk. I mean, just be smart and keep your head, because that's what's going to help everybody get through this and help everything get back to normal as quick as possible. But yeah, definitely think about the people around you and do the best you can to get through it. And we will be back on Monday to talk about it, if not sooner. If other things happen during the weekend, maybe we'll hop on and we'll give you a heads up. But we'll definitely be back Monday, normal time, and we will go from there.
Be there with each other. Be there for each other. Bottom line.
All right. Well, we will have content, Katie Weaver. Don't freak out. We got you. We got you. We will have content. I will try to keep everybody entertained as best we can during all of this. So thanks to everybody who reached out. Thanks to everybody who is still tweeting at us. Thanks to everybody who takes time out of their day to listen to us, whether it's live, whether it's on demand. It's all very, very important to us. So thank you for that. And y'all take care of yourselves this weekend. Much plot to y'all.
Much plot, y'all.